Did I get that track? Can you hear it? You hear that? There's a red-tailed hawk. People think it sounds like an eagle, but the eagle sound you hear on TV actually comes from a red-tailed hawk. All right, I wanted to bring you guys outside this week. It's beautiful. It's getting to be winter here in the Northeast. It's cold and windy, but we're gonna make some Cowboy coffee. I was just out gathering some tinder to get that started. Shed a little blood during the effort, getting it started. That always says hard work's being done when you start getting bloody hands. And we're gonna run down the best of autonomy, the best of Do It Live podcast, the best of Grand Theft World podcast, and we're gonna hit the Peter McCullough interview first. I'll be right back. I'm gonna get this coffee started. But so that people don't have to wait till the end to get solutions, I want to release that fear up front. Can we talk about early treatment and the things that people could do therapeutically without getting into some sort of institutionalized bureaucratic situation out there?
It's true. I've had a variety of interviews. I remember I interviewed with Tucker Carlson. I told him, I said, Tucker, there's no Harvard protocol. There's no Mayo Clinic protocol. There's no Duke University protocol. Do you know that our top shelf academic institutions have batted a zero? They've done nothing to treat outpatients with COVID-19 to prevent hospitalization and death. They haven't tested a single different drug combination. It is stunning. These hospitals have protocols for outpatient treatment of myocardial infarction and diverticulitis and traumatic injuries. But suddenly with COVID-19, our academic institutions, we have 300 medical schools, 2,200 acute care hospitals, 5,600 hospitals overall. None of them could think up a single thing to help a patient prevent hospitalization and death. And this was occurred for months. This was long before the first set of guidelines that came out that said to do nothing. In fact, people were in the habit of doing nothing. Our institutions were in the habit of telling patients, there's no treatment for COVID-19, sit at home, wait until you can't breathe anymore, then come in the hospital. So we established that practice pattern as basically in lockstep, all the institutions across the United States. And it was only independent-minded physicians like myself, like Didier Riot in Marseille, France, Vladimir Zelenko, Monroe, New York, Brian Tyson, George Freed in South Central California, Yvette Lozano here in Dallas, Richard Bartlett out in West Texas. You can name the heroes basically probably on two hands in the United States that basically took bold steps to start to treat patients with COVID-19 at home to prevent hospitalization and death. And this was global. This was across all countries. Not a single country could articulate this problem. It was mass fear and confusion. People were reaching for masks. They were reaching for hand sanitizer. They were all over the place, but they could not focus on the sick patient right in front of them. So as people fell sick at home, what we needed an approach, again, to stop these hospitalizations and deaths. So what we learned fast forward over basically about 2 years, is that the infection was amenable to risk stratification. What that meant is it didn't infect people equally. Thank goodness. We could predict with a high degree of accuracy who was going to be sick enough to be hospitalized or die, and who basically didn't need any treatment at all. And the short equation is that about 25% of adults really need treatment. And it's individuals over age 50. That's where the risks for hospitalization and death become greater than 1%. And then the higher in age, we start adding medical problems like obesity, diabetes, heart and lung disease, kidney disease. We can mathematically calculate who's going to get in trouble. In fact, there are calculators now. The Cleveland Clinic has a calculator to predict hospitalization and death. Now, the Cleveland Clinic doesn't have a protocol to treat patients to prevent hospitalization and death, but by golly, they've got the calculator and it's pretty good. So we can actually calculate who's going to get in trouble. And it's only those people at high risk do we need to treat. The state-of-the-art treatment nowadays actually starts in the nose and the mouth. So we use dilute betadine or dilute hydrogen peroxide solution for oral nasal decontamination. It can be done about once or twice a day for prevention, but during active treatment, it goes every 4 hours, supported by 7 randomized trials, over 2,000 patients. The lead article is by Chowdhury and colleagues. They used dilute povidone iodine or betadine, nose, mouth, and even eye drops every 4 hours could abort the illness. It basically, an incipient COVID-19 could abort the illness 75% of the time. I have patients, as we're talking right now, with active COVID-19, and we are blasting the nose and mouth every 4 hours. We're reducing the viral load. We know with the Delta variant, the viral load is 251 to 1,000-fold more than the prior variant. So the oral nasal decontamination is very important. So we have less of that virus replicating in the nose and mouth, so it doesn't move into the body. In the randomized trial by Chowdhury, 606 patients, 303 randomized into povidone iodine versus dilute saline, was enormously effective. We have supportive data from preclinical studies using other solutions, nebulized hydrogen peroxide. We gargle in the mouth, spray or nebulize in the nose, even sodium hypochlorite, believe it or not, dilute bleach, a few drops in water, also is virucidal in the mouth. We don't recommend it in the nose and in the eyes. It's noxious, but in fact, it certainly works. So we start there. There's a good base of nutraceuticals that are assistive. They're probably not curative in COVID-19, but we recommend them. You mentioned zinc, which is an inhibitor of the viral polymerase. Vitamin D, 5,000 international units as a baseline preventive dose. But in active treatment now, we go to 20,000 international units per day in active treatment because it does work as a steroid hormone, probably is therapeutic. Vitamin C, 3,000 milligrams, and quercetin, 500 milligrams twice a day. That's the nutraceutical base. Now, there are naturopathic physicians who are far more expert than I am that have really taken this to a whole new level, and they can use advanced doses of additional therapies there, because COVID-19, we've learned, is a tremendous catabolic strain on the body. After that, I think the premier solution, I'm working on that right now, I just got called during this interview for a patient, is a monoclonal antibody infusion. These became available in November of 2020. The United States government has purchased hundreds of millions of doses of these. Everybody should know about them. The billboard should be up in every city on where to find a monoclonal antibody infusion. We have 2 of them now. One is emergency authorized GlaxoSmithKline, and it's called sotrovimab. And sotrovimab is a monoclonal antibody directed against a glycosylation attachment to the spike protein. That's important because it's not subject to mutation. And it's associated with over 80% reductions in hospitalizations and death. And we need to give it early in high-risk individuals, for sure, everybody over 65, and then those over age 50 with medical problems. Or we can use Regeneron. The Regeneron is a combination of carasivimab and imdimumab, and that's 2 different monoclonal antibodies attached at 2 different what's called epitopes on the spike protein, which is the spine on the virus. People remember that because former President Trump received Regeneron. Remember that really a confident young doctor who took care of Trump? I love that guy. He said, listen, we're going to get the president better. And he did. He used the monoclonal antibodies and other drugs in combination, which I'll summarize. He got Cadillac treatment. We know Governor Greg Abbott, who failed the vaccine and got COVID-19, he got the antibodies. And recently, podcaster Joe Rogan, big Joe Rogan, receive the monoclonal antibodies and the other drugs in sequence combination? I've been asked to opine on that on national TV. I said, yeah, Joe Rogan, he got just what I drew up for America and for the world in the two seminal publications, one in the American Journal of Medicine in August of 2020, and the second in Reviews in Cardiovascular Medicine in December of 2020. This is Cadillac treatment. Now, if we get the monoclonal antibodies, it's been my experience that we can skip hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. We just move into using inhaled steroids, inhaled budesonide, oral prednisone if there's pulmonary symptoms, oral colchicine, which proven in the co-corona trial, 4,000 patients, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial, reduces the risk of hospitalization and death. And then high-risk patients like the one I have right now, where the oxygen saturation is going down. The low oxygen saturation is due to blood clots in the lungs, micro blood clots. Every autopsy study shows that. And so this patient is being started on Lovenox or enoxaparin, 1 milligram per kilogram, subcutaneous every 12 hours. Otherwise, we could use oral Xarelto or oral Eliquis. There, the active 4 trial was just published using one of these anticoagulation strategies, and it didn't show a difference. You know why? Because they didn't recruit patients who were at high risk. They didn't recruit patients who had a high D-dimer level or a low oxygen saturation. So they recruited very benign cases of COVID-19, and the rates of the endpoints of thromboembolic events, hospitalization, and death were too low. But I'm telling you, that's a failure of clinical trials, not a failure of the medicines. These patients indeed need blood thinners. And one of the final drugs we use all the way through, and we extend it for 90 days now, is aspirin. It's full dose aspirin, 325 milligrams. And even our Italian colleagues now report they're using 700 milligrams a day because they have that tablet size. But what I'm telling you is we use drugs to reduce viral replication. Then we use drugs to treat inflammation, steroids and colchicine, and then blood thinners, aspirin, and the more heavy-duty blood thinners to treat patients. So it's a lot of medicines, but I can tell you, compared to being in the hospital for 4 weeks and going on the mechanical ventilator, patients will take these medicines because it's a serious, potentially fatal infection. I'll say one other thing. We've heard that there is a drug coming forward from Pfizer, and that is a kinase-like 3 a protease inhibitor, a single drug target approach. That's perfectly fine. If that looks like it can be, have an addition to the protocol, we'll welcome it. I tend to doubt single action drugs are going to have much of a role. The other one is molnupiravir by Merck. That's a single action drug, which is a polymerase inhibitor similar to favipiravir, which is used in Russia and other countries, is not too effective and has the same mechanism of action, by the way, as remdesivir. So probably won't be too effective. But two of our main workhorse drugs that we use in COVID-19, particularly if they can't get the monoclonal antibody infusions, are hydroxychloroquine, one of the originals. And I wrote one of the first investigational new drug applications on hydroxychloroquine, 200 milligrams twice a day. Can be extended, by the way, all the way to 30 days. And sometimes we do that. That's supported by over 250 studies, clearly showing reductions in more hospitalization and death when used early. Important, used early. And then the other drug is ivermectin. Ivermectin is a drug that is supported by over 60 clinical studies, over 30 randomized trials, seems to work equally well in the hospital and out of the hospital. Both hydroxy and ivermectin, by the way, have 3 mechanisms of action to treat this syndrome, not one.
All right, so here's how we're gonna make the coffee. I got this rig, it's called a Kennedy cooker. The guy made it by hand. It's out of like number 10 in various types of tin cans. It's a rocket stove. So I pull out the inside, I drop out the bottom, I stack it like this. I'm gonna boil my water right here. But before I can do that, I have to fill the inside with fuel. I got some dead pine branches. They got good pine tarry type substance in there. I'm gonna break these up into some little pieces. I'm gonna give myself some fuel on the bottom. I'm also just gonna put the needles in the middle. We're gonna start the needles, then we'll put some more wood on top. Now some of these needles are kind of moist. I don't know how this is gonna go, but I do have countermeasures if it doesn't go easily. I figured this would be the quickest and easiest way to boil a cup of coffee and give you the rundown of this week's activities and autonomy. So while I refine and break up these little fibers so that they'll catch fire, Let's catch the first clip. This comes from Autonomy Season 6, Week 8. This is a question from the question and answer session. This comes from a student who was talking about some family difficulties, some friction in communication around the holidays, different political differences, different ideologies of freedom, and I gave him some advice, which he found useful later that week, to be able to bridge that gap and to be able to communicate with others without infringing upon their freedom, without compromising your rights, your values. How do we get along in this society where they're driving wedge issues in between all of us? We're seeing each other as enemies, but we're not the enemies. So let's dig into it, and I'll be right back with more how to make coffee. Whether it's like health or politics or economics, people do this all the time. They see a way and they try to get other people, like, you have to, like, we have to do it this way. But that bridge of communication was never built. And the other party almost does the polar opposite, right? I see this a lot, and it happened a lot more prominently since Trump got into office. So you had, like, you know, a wife might support Trump and the husband supports the Democrats, and the gap between them has only gotten wider in the past several years, right? So there's a social phenomenon that's going on out there, driving people and families apart, and it's like almost like a divide and conquer strategy. So part of the situation is, like, see those external forces for what they are, and get your partner to see that as well, to be like, look, there, you know, there's a lot of people benefiting from the breaking up of families out there, from the divorce lawyers to the other services that swoop in from the state to go into those situations. So define the boundaries, define some things in common that you want both and that you both don't want, and start moving from there, being more of the, yeah, I would say it like this, and this also goes for everybody at Thanksgiving. Time with our families is precious. We should be spending our time providing service and aid and loving our families, and spending far less time, like, being at each other's throats. Because I got news for everybody. There are real enemies of freedom loving people on this planet, and they aren't in your house. Okay. The people in your house and your family, they're not the real problem. And we have to take ownership over our part of the problem. But there's also a lot of stuff that's going on here that was going on before Richard Grove was born in 1973. Okay. I don't take responsibility for the things other people did before I got here, but I am responsible for my life, my actions, what I do from the time I was born until the time I die. Okay. And so understanding what's going on in our context in it can also insulate ourselves from some of the other noise. And that can make dealing with these situations of signal and clarifying and getting on the same page a lot easier. All right, so what I've got going on over here, I got small sticks, I got my needles getting processed, I got some bigger twigs I'm going to throw in there, I got a piece of fat wood that I'm going to shave down, do some rooster tail or feather stick with it, so it's going to light easy. I'm going to use my ferro rod to combust it. I'll put this piece on top. We'll boil the water in here. I've got coffee in here, got my ferro rod here, and I have my cook kit here, should we need to use cup, strainer, these sort of things. And now we'll process it, and then we'll light it. Won't need that. We'll need that. There. Didn't need this. Dude, come on. you're just breaking open the fibers. And if I get shavings on here, we're going to collect those shavings and we're going to put them in there. I don't even have to pick up my knife off the wood. I just slide it back and push back down with my thumb. Very safe. You're not pushing hard. You're pushing away from your body. Make a little rooster tail all around. All I want is for when I light these needles with the ferro rod, I want something for sure to start catching fire. And it's going to light these other twigs on fire. These other twigs might be a little wet. This fat wood's been in my bag. It's pretty dry. Well, I got a bunch of shavings. I'll collect those just like that. Let's keep those separate. Put those in like that. And then I probably don't need this whole piece of fat wood to power the fire enough to boil the water. So let's try we'll use a piece of this fat wood, like half of it, and a couple twigs, and we'll see if we can boil water to make coffee. And while I'm doing that, let's go to the next clip. Is going to come from the Saturday Do It Live. This is the Autonomy podcast for graduates and students. It gives them a chance to express themselves in a public forum, work on their public speaking skills, trigger their complexity just a little bit. And as you go through and listen, you're going to hear Jonathan from the UK. You're going to hear Mike Nimitz. They're going to be talking about aspects of appreciation. Let's see if that'll break or not. I'm trying to notch this out so we can break it and save half for later. Elements of entrepreneurism as applies to the business world and personal world. And let's check in with the Saturday Do It Live crew. We'll check out this clip and we'll be right back to make more coffee. Just a couple splitters there. There we go. Save it for later.
May I continue, if you don't mind, Marcin?
I don't mind. I welcome you.
Oh, thank you. Firstly, before I go on, excellent job of doing it live tonight. I really enjoyed what you said, and I had to think from Rob's points back to your original quote from Richard using John Galt there of his hyper-individualism. And as Rob was saying, we are ones that people are going to rely on, especially because of our skills that we're going to be learning from autonomy, the use of our personal excellence, making us better, being able to set the example of how to deal with each other through non-violent communication. People are going to start to look to us. And I personally feel an obligation that with those neighbours that I have around me, to put myself amongst them and be with my neighbours, and if they are looking for something, to then be able to help them, as I know that's going to that it will help and benefit all of us in the local community. And so with the local community, if you are displaying your personal excellence that autonomy is going to give you, your benefits of autonomy, your autonomous nature, people will be asking you questions, and that's, rather than your answer, is your opportunity to listen for them. I'm still listening to last week's week 7 lecture, and it was brilliant, the way that Richard put forward of me needing to be one there to listen, absorb the person's thoughts, their expression of their problem, and then being able to empower them by asking those good questions. What are they going to do about it? What are their options? And I think largely today people are fearful because they don't have that plan of action. They realize that action conquers fear, but like the Milgram experiment showed, they just have somebody saying the experiment must continue to them. They're not being given that choice from they, them, the powers that be. And we need to be there within our communities, listening to them, helping, as Rob said, letting them understand they have a choice, they have options. And when they start to talk about what they think they can do, using the skills from autonomy, our interview techniques as well, we start to build with them their own personal plans of action. Those plans of action are the tactical level, getting other people further ahead. And hello, anybody from Round Donut Buildings who are listening. Those strategic level ones, we probably don't need. We need 1,000 little cuts to make the system obsolete. Those local communities making the big centralizations obsolete. That's what I'm hoping for, mate.
Excellent points. Thank you. Michael, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I will.
It's all right.
Kind of jumping on what Bordy said there, if we believe ourselves to be entrepreneurs, it's, who we are is not just us. It's our relationship to other people. And, essentially with an entrepreneur mindset, it is one in which we have to be able to listen. We have to be able to observe the people around us, the community of people around us, and be able to understand the value that we can bring to the table, and then the value that we can identify in other people. And it's through that communication and trust that we really are able to affect each other's life in a positive way. And certainly when it comes to like listening, for example, and really being in rapport with other people, that's really the basis for trust. And it is when we are in rapport with other people, when other people see that we understand where they're coming from, is when they're able to understand, another statement that Rich made is, people don't care what you have to say until they know you care.
Yeah. They will see then.
So we're just gonna gather up these little pieces like that. We're gonna put them in our tin. Our tin looks like that. We're now going to, first off, put your knife back in the sheath. Put it with your gloves. Most people put it on their belt. I got a bag today. This isn't that serious, but I need it on my belt. This is my fire starter that I have with this kit. Let's see. I'm gonna have to do some research on where I got this. It's a New Hampshire company. I tested a bunch like 10 years ago, and this one seemed to be, in my opinion, most bomb-proof. Like if you had to use it with snow, your hands are in mittens, you can't afford to lose two pieces, so I tied them together. That's my piece, this orange piece, I made that. All right, I've moved the rocket stove. I put it on the ground. The ground around here is really wet. It just rained all last night. These leaves are wet. I've still raked leaves away from where it's going to be. I'll continue to rake some leaves away. But let's go ahead and see if we can get this to light, boil our water, make our coffee, and look at the next clip for the week. Maybe I need to be outside more and practice more. Maybe that's just one. Look at that. Already showing the wear of today's effort. I'm showering it with sparks. This is not how you're supposed to do it, by the way. There you go. We got fire. We got fire. And we were recording. That's not too bad. This is where we're going to add our fat wood. This is where we're going to add some other sticks. We're going to let fire eat up through it. This is where the magic's going to happen. We're going to put the rocket on there. And then we're going to drop this right like this. Not in view. It feels like an accomplishment. This is a good little stove. You don't have to put much wood in it. It boils water like in 3 or 4 minutes, and then you're all set. It's going to boil. All right, as we're letting that coffee boil up, it takes about 3 to 4 minutes. Let's go ahead and check out the Sunday autonomy Q&A session, and let's see what kind of value was delivered on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, and you
to
have
the
to do that
masses.
because part of being a conservative is those people aren't like the ones out in the street yelling and doing events and these sort of things. The conservatives don't do those things. They don't do marches and protests and all these. It's like part of the, like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. That just seems to be a
Yeah.
dynamic that exists, right? If the right wants to support Second Amendment, it's not 2 million people in the street with guns. It's people send money to lobbyists and they run ads or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's a different strategy, I guess.
Is it? You think that's effective though?
No, I don't think it's effective. I think it'd be interesting to see, people open carrying, because the whole thing is freedom's for everyone. Second Amendment's for everyone. It's not just like one side or the other. Everyone has the right to self-defense. So if we all had these mentalities, there wouldn't be so much predation in the first place, because there wouldn't be opportunity. There wouldn't be enticement, right? But in the mob mentality, there's one person running and there's a bunch of other people running after them. The mob runs. They're like, let's get the guy, right? None of those people are thinking as individuals really at that point, because the emotional fervor and frenzy is taken over. Adrenaline has taken over in that situation. And I think it's a tragic situation. Kyle should have never had to be there in the first place. The police and the mayor and the state and the National Guard shouldn't have let people go around burning down businesses. Those are not the type of protests that America traditionally has had. That is not what Martin Luther King did, right? He didn't say let's wait till dark and all dress and cover our faces and go burn stuff and make a scene. It was about being out in front. Like Gandhi didn't do those sort of things either. So there's two effective non-white political activists who also didn't show those type of demonstration techniques, right? Gandhi's whole big idea is let's get beaten by the British on camera, because it's only by showing the world how brutal the empire is that they'll wake up to it. So so making the oppression visible is how you end tyranny. And that, the mostly peaceful but fiery protests and these sort of things, those weren't examples of like the right way to resolve these things. And then the stand down by government not to protect individual lives and private property and these sort of things, that's also another fault that created that whole tragic situation. Let's do from here. All right, now we get to the fun part. We just covered the comment, the question about mass psychosis and do it live, or not do it live, the Sunday Q&A for autonomy students. Now we're going to go into something a little more heavy duty. We're going to cover some clips from Grand Theft World. I think this is coming from episode 54. It's Alex Jones talking about Cecil Rhodes, New World Order. You might have heard of some of these people if you've hung out on Tragedy and Hope before. Let's go to that clip, and then I'm actually going to mix this coffee, start having coffee, and we're going to talk about the crescendo for this episode. Can I handle it without gloves? Let's see. Little drip, little drip, little drip, little drip. Oh, not perfect. Ooh, it's hot. Hot. That's a full cup of coffee too. And I got plenty of spare, so we might be out here for a while.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
I know, Alex. This is Grand Theft World. How many times do I have to tell you that? All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. He mentioned that whole thing about there might be a plan. Cecil Rhodes, take the Rhodes pill.
More than 100 years old. It even goes back.
It is one of he's read some of the books too, because there's Tragedy and Hope, and then there's the Last Will and Testament of Cecil Rhodes, and there's Tragedy and Hope 101. It's the Cliff Notes, and then he also talked about technocracy in that sentence. So that's a stack of reading. You don't have to read the whole book. Like, you don't have to read the whole thing. Read the Cliff Notes and see why you'd want to dig into parts of this bigger book.
And
On the other hand,
the Anglo-American establishment to get all the names, the dates, the players.
These books over here. They
Yeah, there you
always
go.
sit here. That's what these books are.
Yeah, there
It's
you go.
like the roadmap to understanding what's going on amidst all the stories that we're talking about. Like, there are
Correct.
clues. There's being clues. Now, I understand it takes time to read. That's the FDA's point. They're like, there's 350,000 pages responsive to this request, and we can review 500 a day. So it's going to take us till 2076. And until we're done reviewing all these things, you guys can't talk about it. That's basically what Alex was describing with the Pfizer judge situation, because I dug into like the legal like what are the references for all these stories. You get into the legal documents, and I think that's the justification of how they came up with 2076 is there's documents, and they're only willing to review so many at a time because of resources. So therefore, they'd have to protect this whole thing and under seal till 2076, just like the JFK assassination records.
They keep pushing back and keep pushing back and keep pushing back.
That's because the British State Secrets Act is 75 years, and we're not 75 years past 1963 yet. It's very simple, but to explain it to an American audience, you have to make it look like, oh, sorry, not yet. Sorry, not yet. Sorry, not yet. There were British
Why would the
and NATO
British have an
personnel.
interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, why would the British have that sort of influence
Yeah.
over that narrative? That's a good question to ask.
Yeah. There's big hammers being swung out there. You should get a glimpse at these people that are swinging them. I think it is meaningful, and the context that these books provides neatly makes sense of a lot of what you're seeing today as far as the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, their plan to change over society, whether you like it or not, and in the future you'll own nothing and you'll like it. Well, that's the same thing Genghis Khan used to say to people. It's just different language.
Yeah.
You know, they've updated it. They've wordsmithed it a little bit with some copywriters and some strategic communications people that in the past Genghis would have just eaten.
That's correct.
Yeah.
He said it was ordained from the heavens. You know, they said the sages say that we are but one family, so you should bow down to me. What the letter he sent to the Japanese. So it's just, I mean, the letter he sent to so many nations, but I remember the one they sent to the Japanese, so where he, where his court writers basically was like, yeah, the sages say we're one family, and that Genghis is God ruler, and so how nice that must be. I also find it
of people who don't get killed.
But don't worry, Fauci said your right should be superseded by the fact there's a pandemic for the greater good, Rich. It's not like the greater good comes from a British philosopher.
Now, there was another connection that I think was missed in that those connections between like Cecil Rhodes and Jeffrey Epstein. These guys had a lot in common, actually. Jeffrey Epstein abused children. Cecil Rhodes created, I think it was called the Lovat Scouts, from which the Boy Scouts were fashioned, and the Boy Scouts have never had any problems with sexual improprieties with children of the pedophilic nature. There's no hundreds of thousands of cases of that. They weren't shut down, split up because of that or anything like that. And when you look into Rhodes and his coterie of friends that were instrumental in creating Boy Scouts of America, there's a lot to learn there. And then when you compare that to the history of like British intelligence, there also seems to be those proclivities there. They might have gotten it when they picked it up, going through and invading various parts of Asia over their empire years. It might have come out, the time of Clive, the time of Clive. The during the time of the Thuggee and the Indiana Jones movie hints at the British incursions and that they picked up certain elements of the culture. There's elements of cannibalism, vampirism. There's a whole bunch of things that might have just gotten picked up and proliferated within that ruling culture that would pick up other techniques of subjugation from other ruling cultures of the past.
That's a big thing in the ancient history. In the Achaemenid Empire, the Persian Empire, the Greeks picked up a lot of what. That's where the whole divine right of kings comes from. That area comes from the Middle East, and so they brought that over to Europe, Greece, and then over to Rome, and then Europe. And this sort of like lineage that you have a divine right to rule over your subjects, as though you stand apotheosized above them.
Well, I'm glad King Charles doesn't think of himself like that, and I'm glad he's not related to like Vlad the Impaler, and doesn't have Dracula's castle in his real estate holdings, because that would give me pause to be like, is there something else going on here that maybe I'm not seeing in the news every day?
It's funny because I have a John Bowne report, the Infernal King speech, John Bowne discussing how Prince Charles is next in line after Queen Elizabeth to inherit 6.6 billion acres of land. And what he'll do alongside Bill Gates' initiative around the world of controlling farmland to control food.
So Bill Gates, he collects a bunch of farmland. He's blocking out the sun. He's got genetically modified mosquitoes, syringes flying around. He gave 319 million to all these media outlets. How much did he actually give to children?
And he said it's 4 billion. According to Alex Jones, it's over 2015, 4 billion. That's his third. That's over a couple of years. That's an interesting
4 billion. Last I saw, he was getting kicked out of Africa because his vaccine program was actually giving children polio. Right.
It was the oral.
So what exactly is he doing that's philanthropic? Because all these things seem to be servicing Bill Gates's empire. Maybe I'm just missing the philanthropic part.
What's more disturbing is the windfall profits he's made since he got out of the operating system business, we'll say, and technology.
Oh yeah,
business.
He's tripled his wealth since the antitrust.
You got it.
Kind of like Rockefeller did after that.
He doesn't have to pay taxes because it's all
because they had a foundation. Right. Yeah. That's where Rockefeller Foundation came from, and they set up medical industry in China as well as the United States.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a lot of parallels, ominous parallels between Bill Gates and J.D. Rockefeller.
It doesn't seem like it's just we're going from A to D. It seems like there's some B's and C's in there that we're trying to build out and understand some context, that it's not so outside the balance to make those rational deductions, to make those judgments, that there seems to be a continuation of a philosophy that is being imparted through his foundations and being perpetuated around the world. And
it's almost like these people are wolves in sheep's clothing, Tony.
Oh,
Yeah.
Beatrice
I'm glad
Webb,
the guy who wrote the book on the New World Order and the New Machiavellis wasn't part of that group that had a symbol of wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
And they weren't instrumental in 20th century history at all.
No, not at all. In fact, it's not like that's not even still going on. That was just the 20th. That's an artifact of the beginning of the 20th century, Rich. Nothing to see there at all. Nothing to worry about.
But
they have no connection with the X Club and the emerging new scientism.
Fabian English socialism is a lot like Ingsoc of 1984, which does seem to be the prevailing wind these days. So maybe there is something more to that. You have to weigh it like on a balance.
So you're saying it's important to look into these and not just say that, so let me put it this way. If you see smoke in the middle of a forest, you could deduce that maybe it's just precipitation of some sort, condensation. Or you could say, or if it's concentrated smoke and it has a different color and texture, if you will, than what you'd see of a normal condensation, that maybe it requires more looking into, more research.
Is it smoke or is it steam?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Compare and contrast.
If there's particulates in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It will have a different color it would be thicker, different color of the smoke. It'd be more concentrated in one area. It would actually require more investigation instead of just sort of blasé, like, nothing to see here. Just work on the culture. Well, it seems like whether it's 319 million over a year or two, or maybe possibly 4 billion according to Alex Jones over 5-6 years, that they are influencing culture through media. So
that doesn't make any sense, because then if culture was influenced through media, then Bill Gates influencing it with his money might be him influencing everybody who's influenced by media. That definitely shouldn't be going on. I don't think that's going on.
It would be the logical.
It would be really noticeable.
That would be the inference, unfortunately.
Be obvious if it was going on, probably. So we'd notice it. That's what I'm thinking. So we don't have to worry about it.
No, we don't have to think about it or worry about it.
No,
So
we
we're good
shouldn't
to
have
go.
to think about it at all. Yeah, because I'm interested. There's been a lot of talk over the years. I mean, Operation Dark Winter was World Economic Forum,
2001.
Johns Hopkins, and Bloomberg didn't exist at that time. But if they did, they would have participated in that exercise. That was an anthrax outbreak, I think.
Pretty sure. I'll bring it up right
and
now.
anthrax had really just broken out, brought out by those people, and said, "Death to America, Allah is great," all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sending it to Tom Daschle to make sure America was real scared after 9/11, right?
Correct.
So there's that piece of evidence. Then Gates had not only pointed toward coronavirus in his past TED Talks, but also other biologicals and things of that nature.
No. Actually,
No?
Dark Winter exercise held at Andrews
Was
Air Force
smallpox?
Base. Smallpox, Washington, D.C.
Okay, I was right. Yeah, because
the 23rd, 2001 is a
I
fictional.
asked that question earlier, and I was like, I can't remember. Was it anthrax or smallpox? It made sense. It would be anthrax because
I
anthrax
thought it
is
was
broken
anthrax
out.
because it just happened.
But Dark
yeah.
Winter is smallpox. Okay.
Yep.
Now, to Tim's point, Tim's like, it came out from Rick Smith or Barta, the guy that Rick Bright at Barta that we pointed to in last week's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Remember?
Oh, yeah. I know.
He's like, Barta said this thing about smallpox, and then Bill Gates said this thing, and all the conspiracy people jumped on it. And I was like, well, first off, that's a straw man. Where's the evidence of that argument? It's not being made. The argument being made in a community of people who have finer attention to detail, more historical context, and understand these things are ongoing. They see things like Operation Dark Winter, 2001. And then all of a sudden, Joe Biden starts talking about Dark Winter, and it becomes a media theme. That's a veiled reference to a smallpox operation, exercise, whatever you want to say it. And then Barta comes out, and then these other things. Bill Gates says these things, right? But I'm pretty sure Gates had talked about this in TED Talks of the past years ago, in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So this has all been built up. So
2014, Bill Gates, capitalism did not eradicate smallpox, as the Washington Post.
But there's a vaccine for it, Tony, so we shouldn't worry about it. But we should worry about it because there's
4 years before that, in 2010, they said that it had been eradicated thanks to the
just like
vaccine.
polio.
So, but then
people cite polio as a vaccine eradicated polio. But if I bring out United Nations Agenda 21 framework, one of their goals for the 21st century was to eradicate polio through vaccinations. They still hadn't done it yet.
Well,
and then when you look into it, you find out some of their vaccinations actually cause polio in kids in Africa, and they had to kick the Gates Foundation and those people out of there. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then the point about Bill Gates buying buku interest in all these media companies is, well, the Gates Foundation already monopolized biotech and already signed up Fauci in 2010 for the decade of the vaccine. And they already created CEPI, which told these other manufacturers that they could produce the mRNA vaccine in the first place. And there's a whole bunch of other things in play that are being left out of when, that conversation when he like poo-poos it.
Right? Yeah, the problem is there's a preponderance of evidence. It's not just one piece. There's multiple pieces together, and they're affecting. My issue with what Tim Pool said there is they are affecting the culture. He's just like, well, there's nothing to do about the culture.
No, they manufacture.
What are you talking? Yeah, they're manufacturing
consent.
Culture,
this is all.
Dude.
I mean, you can go from who's the crazy old dude who just said that people should be like the people who without the vaccine, how they get food. Noam Chomsky, that guy, manufacturing
Chomsky,
consent.
Yeah, sure.
He was a book he wrote with Edward Herman.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go all the way to Bernays, Lippmann, Ivy Lee.
Yeah, you're getting into propaganda
Ayer.
and psychological techniques of essentially human behavior and manipulating behavior and behavioral
And
techniques.
they openly state it. State it. Like, you don't have to read a whole book. You could just read the introduction to
he's
propaganda by Bernays and get it.
Right. No, it's just that's all you need, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you can watch the 4-hour Century of the Self and see how it was
invisible
applied.
government.
Yeah.
The purpose of shaping people's opinions. Yeah, either one.
Bernays, Woodrow Wilson. I'm gonna mix them again. I'm sorry, but we're gonna watch like the 4-hour documentary by Adam Curtis. The Century of the Self and how they applied this and how well it worked in the realm of PR, propaganda, advertisement, and how effective it was. And then obviously we can get into the 50s, 60s, 70s for the behavioral studies. It just becomes overwhelming. I mean, it's an interesting artifact. The one issue here, though, is like he's not wrong that like we have to affect the culture, but you have to understand how they're affecting the culture. So it's just like that's the issue I have with Tim Pool. He doesn't want to. I get that. I don't think James had a a point to mention. I don't just because I've watched enough Tim Pool to get an idea, and I've seen him evolve over the years, that I think this is just always how he's been. He doesn't want to ever go down the conspiracy, what he considers to be the
Well, let's put it this way: none of us
route.
wanted to believe the things we currently understand today.
That's true.
We just wanted to understand what was going on, and it went far beyond our beliefs.
But unless he takes that next step, he's never going to be able to affect the culture as much as he thinks he's going to be able to, because he doesn't know how they're doing it. That's the potential I see in him as well. Right.
It's like what happens potential. When you can get like Corbett's conduit of information plugged into networks of millions of younger people who realize there's people that have already been there and done that and left you a much more accurate map than what's being handed out daily, that you guys are trying to decipher what's going on. It's like you can't understand it from the current events, but you can understand it with this historical knowledge set that doesn't take, a long time, but it's less than 15,000 hours that it took to indoctrinate us into believing things that weren't true. Right. Understanding the truth only takes like tens to hundreds of hours of internal work and review of that which exists, and the juxtaposition of those, and the adjudication between objective reality and subjective reality by inductive and deductive logic.
Correct. That's correct. And it's not like he has to all of a sudden recreate the wheel and do a bunch of productions that other people have done to expose Bill Gates or Jeffrey Epstein or George Soros or all these other, or Klaus Schwab. He doesn't have to do that. He just needs to be aware of how they are doing it, so he knows how to at least to communicate it on a general level for a general audience, and then use or backwards engineer the techniques they're using in order to affect the culture in a more efficacious, more effective way, or effectual way. Because otherwise, he's always going to be one step behind, and then he's going to complain that he's always one step behind and the culture isn't catching up. Why isn't the culture catching up, Mr. Pool, I should say? I wonder why. And so I get that he doesn't want to do that research.
It's a cybernetics.
He's going to have to. He's going to have to. He's going to have to wake up at some point. Well, I hope. I mean, it's good that he and Luke had spent time together. I think Luke spent time on his property in his RV or whatever he has for quite some time. So it's good that they developed a relationship to have that conversation, because you can tell they've been together for some time for them to get in that heated discussion like that. And it was, I actually really appreciate that. That to me is a not only an incredible sign of parrhesia, but it's them being as honest and having a level of a relationship where they feel it's okay enough to actually call each other out.
Yeah, I think that's healthy.
And just have a disagreement. Yes, extremely healthy. And that's what's missing the most in our culture right now.
Right. We don't get to see that too often.
All right, for this last clip, I'm just going to kind of talk while I clean up the site here, prepare to get back to the house, continue work inside. It's a little cold and chilly. I've had my warm cup of Joe. Thank you guys for joining me for this adventure, for this review of the past week and all the things that we do here at Autonomy Unlimited, Grand Theft World, all the things that I have on my schedule every week. I wanted to give you a little glimpse, a little insight outside the studio so that you could see what I'm like when I'm not sitting behind a desk. Peace. All right, so this last clip, this comes from a student in Autonomy Season 6. We do a lecture every Friday night. The lecture starts at 9 p.m. I get done around 1, 2, 2:30 a.m. Then whoever's still at the lecture, which is 2/3 of the class, usually stay through the whole thing, people get to come on and ask a question. This particular evening, I was discussing the art of sales, which is not convincing, conniving, persuading, pushing, high pressure. It's none of that cringeworthy stuff. It's all about high-value problem solving. It's all about making real connections with people, finding out what their problems are, making a better plan for how to move forward. And that's what we're going to talk about in this clip. So the student that came on and had this question and started to elaborate his value that he got from that night's exercise, that night's lecture, was someone who already had a whole bunch of experience on the topic that I was teaching that night. So it's a 12-week course. 2 or 3 weeks are on the art of sales and marketing and the technical stack. This was the first week of the sales presentation. So as someone who has a lot of sales experience as well, I'm teaching it from my perspective. I have that experience. The student also has that experience. So I thought it'd be enlightening for you to check out Howard's comments to see what value someone who's a seasoned entrepreneur, seasoned salesperson, someone who deals with executives and finance all the time, what kind of value someone like that could get out of a course like this.
Who has a question tonight and wants to be the first courageous and intrepid person to break the silence?
I'd like to go first.
Oh, I talked about you. Did you hear me talking about you tonight?
I did.
I hope you were being productive while I was talking about you.
I took copious notes, and I think I can offer some real value here.
All right. What do you got?
Well, so first of all, for the audience, Richard and I have something in common in that we were both commission-driven mercenaries on Wall Street.
Only for a short period of time. I mean, I don't think any of us. How long did you do your stint?
So I was there for a couple of years as in sales management, and so I described the process as running a gladiator academy. Because as you know, sales is really, I'm going to explain why sales is the greatest job in the world. I'm going to explain why it gives you the most future opportunities out of any position that you can have in a company. And then I'd like to give everybody some tips on how to make money and how anybody can be successful, and show you kind of like how it translates. And so just to give everybody some background, I used to sell networks to Wall Street for market data and trading floor technology. Kind of on Wall Street's back end, we had a network into over 2,000 members of the financial community, where we could turn up additional services. It was a very, very expensive product. We had capabilities that nobody else had. We were the technological leaders in the field. We could do true quality of service, where you could do light glass video, or you could do real-time market data, or you could do voice, or all kind of these things, when nobody else was doing that on Wall Street. And we could turn it up in a record amount of time because we already had the pipes in. So it was like a real kind of like fascinating job. I got into telecom because I left a think tank in Washington, D.C. after hearing George Gilder speak. And George Gilder talked about the internet industry being kind of the next greatest revolution. And the first revolution was horsepower. And then the next great revolution was the microprocessor. And he said that the internet was going to be the next great revolution. And it was going to, right now is really, really expensive. And then, you take the cost out of it and it would absolutely change the world. And the thing that was really, really expensive was bandwidth. And so in the early days of the internet, we were selling 45 megabits a month of internet connectivity for $85,000 with a managed router on the end. And so it was very, very profitable. It was very, very lucrative, and it was a very growing industry. And so to my point about it being kind of the best job in the entire company, is that there's really no other job where you can progress as fast as you can by being able, having a proven capability of winning deals, engaging customers, creating value for the company, creating revenue. And so if you can do that, boom, you can advance. And so I just started calling internet companies, and I found a position where I could go from you got promoted if you hit your quota 3 months out of 4. Boom, they took you up. I want to say like 10. The first bump was like 10K. You did it again. You went from account rep to account executive. You went from account executive to sales executive. I think I went from like 30,000 a year to 90,000 a year in 6 months, kind of a thing, on just like my base salary, not even including, like commissions and things like that. And I was good at it. And so then I, went into sales management, and then my company gets acquired by a Wall Street market data company. And we do a $400 million IPO, and we go into kind of like a growth mode. And I got to build the team that took on Wall Street from what was a kind of, taking the parent company's thin root market data network and taking it to others. And so, so that is just a little bit of a background. I'll tell you that my average rep made about $250,000 a year. My top guys made around or over 400K, somewhere around 400K. And then after I left, because we were a startup, so we didn't have the same, bucket of services. As the bucket of services developed, we had people that were killing it over $1 million a year. And so there's no other job that you can go from, hey, you're the new guy in town and nobody knows who you are, to you are now the CEO's best friend and he knows your name and everybody in the company knows your name because you're knocking down deals. So it's a very, very interesting place to, you know, to be. And to, you know, to Richard's point is, it's the coolest job that you can have in the company as well. So not only are you successful because you're a problem solver, but it is the funnest place. You eat really well. You get to see the world. I've been to London. I've been to Amsterdam. I've been to Paris. I've been to Switzerland. I've done, you know, business like all over the world, because you're trying to get the attention of, you know, very, very successful people. They're used to eating well and they've got a certain standard. And so you get to enjoy that as well. So you have the finest food. You get to go to the finest vacations. You get to take them on outings and, like, you know, crazy, you know, just, you know, because you're trading, you know, time with that person in a kind of focused, friendly, congenial manner. And you're essentially just getting to, you know, and sometimes you're literally being paid to, like, hang out. And then if you're doing your job right, you're problem solving for them, you're gathering information, you're listening to what their issues are so that you can then, you know, kind of solve their problem. It gives you the way that you make your money is you're, number one, driving the revenue for the company. And that's very, very, very important from, like, you know, just like a revenue capture position. But if you're good at what you're doing, you're making money for the company in innovative ways that they would not have been able to do. And I'll just give you, like, some examples. My consulting company is called the Human Productivity Lab. And one of the things that got started was because I realized as a sales guy, you either get to, you know, if you've got, you know, 100 sales reps and you want to grow, you know, revenue by X amount of time, you can hire 10 more reps, but you're, like, rolling the dice, and some of them aren't going to work out, and some of them are going to be alcoholics, and some of them are going to be, you know, crazy, and some of them are going to quit 5 minutes after you hired them because they got a better job offered from somebody else or whatever. And so there's all this kind of uncertainty. And so, like, why don't we just take the sales reps we have and make them 10% more productive? And then that's a guaranteed thing. And so I went to management and I said, I'd like a bunch of money so that we can test productivity technologies and we can make the reps that we have more productive. And so I ended up being one of the first sales managers to deploy web conferencing in a sales organization back when it was Placeware, so that our reps could use the screen share and web conferencing to show people how to trace route their network in real time. So you could verify all the quality statistics that the sales guy was telling you by using something called a looking glass on the network to actually see the network performance in real time for the routes that you're interested in. And then, and so that was one of the ways that we created value. We were one of the first sales organizations on Wall Street to have BlackBerries when BlackBerries were crazy expensive, hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the BlackBerry, $80 a month for service times all the sales folks and the sales engineers and everything like that. But so I'd go to my bosses and I'd lobby them and I'd say, hey, I want to spend this money, but this is how we're going to get it back. And I want to test it with these executives in the company. And you give everybody on the executive team one to, you know, like, to play with. And I was doing a training session in St. Louis, and I was out of my office, and I'm teaching with the product manager. He's doing his section. I'm doing my session. My boss is sitting in the back of the room. And every time the guy sits up to go, you know, do his talk, I sit down for a minute and I'm slamming and jamming, and I'm closing a deal with a major investment bank on Wall Street for some network connectivity or whatever it is. And I'm blind carbon copying my boss who's sitting across the room. And by the end of this training session, I've closed the deal, even though I'm out of my territory, even though I'm in the middle of a frigging training session where I'm an instructor. And my boss is like, I get it. We'll get it for everybody, kind of a thing. And that's the kind of massive value that you can bring, being able to sell internally, because you're an entrepreneur if you're doing it right. and that you've got flexibility to spend money and allocate resources because you've got a track record of, hey, making that money that's invested pay off dividends across time. You're also the firm's market reconnaissance person. So you're the guy that's actually in the market figuring out what the product needs to look like because you're the one that's actually talking to the customer. And so you're providing feedback, if you're good, to marketing and product management to improve the product, price the product, correctly, to understand the market. And so if you can innovate in that and just helping them understand what the market is, one of the things that I did, because I'm into visualization and how do you learn at the speed of light, is I created a spreadsheet of every market data provider on Wall Street and all of the major investment banks, all of the major buy side, sell side firms, et cetera, who needed to talk to who. And then I'd print it out on a plotter. And it cost crazy money back then, and it would roll out. I would have it in a tube, and I would literally roll it across the floor, and then you could physically visualize what the market looked like and who was selling to who. And that was innovative and something that helped the company formulate its sales strategy. I got to create and innovate and create sales, literally direct the development of hardware and software engineers to create demonstration equipment that showed that we could be running a T1 line or a T3 line into your facility and providing video, voice, market data, trading floor technologies, in real time, and where people could actually see it and use it and prove to themselves that they're getting the video quality that we're guaranteeing. And who gets to do that? It's crazy the opportunities that you have within the company because you're providing, this kind of value. And not only is it positive value of revenue creation, but a lot of times you're protecting the company in ways that they didn't have. I got one time I got assigned to evaluate Enron when Enron was coming into the bandwidth market, saying that they were going to have bandwidth trading and everything like that. And number one, I recognized the opportunity. Oh my God, Enron, those are the smartest guys in the room. We got to do business with that. I went to product management, marketing, everything like that. And they're like, yeah, those are the smartest guys in the room. Go look into that. I look into that. I'm like, this is BS. It wasn't that I knew that Enron was crooked or a scam or anything like that. I just knew the idea was dumb and it wasn't going to work. And I pushed our company away from doing anything with Enron because I just didn't think it was going to work from a business standpoint. And boom, the whole Enron blew up less than a year later. And I kept the company, out of that mess. And so that's just another example of a way that you can build value. You're building value for the company because you're innovating to get it done because there's a big pot of money sitting there for you to be the one to solve the problem that gets the job done. One time we had a customer, and the customer we were trying to get some stuff in a co-location facility in New York City, and I didn't get paid on the connectivity side until this circuit got turned up. And the other guy who had a completely separate company just hosting stuff in this building, he didn't get paid until we got the circuit turned up. And so we had to problem solve a way of doing it. And we figured, hey, we're right next to each other. Why don't we just plug it in? And that sounds dumb, but at the time, everybody in New York City, everybody in the world, every country in the world would have to run what were called local loops from the telco. You'd have to order it from Verizon or from Southwestern Bell or whoever the telco company was, and it would take them 45 days to get it turned up. And sometimes it would take even longer, and it would be all screwed up, and nobody got paid or anything like that until it got done. And so between the two of us, we said, why don't we just drill a hole in the wall? And I went to my management and he went to his management, and we went to the building, and they charged us $4,500 to drill a hole in the wall in New York City. And we had to get that funded. And the guy that did that, his name's Hunter Newby. He went on to revolutionize the entire data collaboration building by taking that room in New York City and making it what's called a carrier neutral co-location facility, where he didn't just bring in connectivity from mine, he brought in connectivity from all of the networks, and he started plugging them together at the thing, and he went on to build $1 billion business for a couple of different companies, and now he owns a gazillion things. So you're able to solve problems and make money and be innovative in a way that you're not able to do in kind of any other, any other job that's like really out there. Once you get done with sales and you're a proven commodity of selling things and bringing high revenue, there's so many different ways that you can go. You can, like, if sales isn't for you, you can go into sales engineering, or you can go into product management, or you can go into product marketing, or you could do, you've got options. Even if you can't sell, but people like you and you know how to product solve, and maybe you don't like having the stress of a commission, or the being able to meet a quota, but now that you know the market and you know the customer and you know the problem and you know everything else, now you're able to drop yourself into all of these other different ways. I was able to start a consulting company where we worked for, Fortune 50 companies, helping them understand next generation telepresence, visual collaboration tools. And so we're saying, hey, we can take your existing employees and we can make them more profitable by shooting them around the world at the speed of light. And we were some of the top consulting firms in telepresence and video conferencing and visual collaboration. Just because I had an understanding of how all of these technologies were coming together and we're going to provide, real value for real companies. At one time, we had kind of like a little boutique analyst firm. You can go and start companies. So, like, if you're a proven revenue producer, then you have the open door to be able to work for any company that wants to come into that industry, that needs to have the specialized knowledge that you have, just by knowing the market participants, what's going on, how the product works, what are the features that the market is looking for, and helping to create that, whether you're doing it for a startup. Or one of the other things that we did for consulting companies is we would consult for private equity guys and venture capitalists. I've consulted for investment banks and private things that want to understand, okay, we're about to invest a whole bunch of money in these technologies. If you've never driven around Silicon Valley in a stretch Escalade limo with a bunch of venture capitalists from Europe and gone into companies where your job is, you listen to what the CEO of the company says, the CFO of the company, and the head of sales, and then you leave the building, and then all the venture capitalists are like, okay, is that really what's going on? Is that really how it works? How, what are the real margins? How, is their product positioned for the way that the market is, et cetera? We made a correct assumption. We realized that a company called Cisco was going to buy a company called Tandberg. We went public with that, or we realized that it was the only thing that they could do to achieve the revenue goals that their CEO had set up, was to acquire Tandberg and take the revenue from this other company to meet a publicly stated revenue goal that John Chambers did. And so, they're going to have to buy Tandberg. And that month, that industry knowledge was worth a fortune to certain investment bankers and private equity guys, et cetera, that were trying to understand how this market was going to shake out. So that's just, another example of the future future opportunities that you get from being a problem solver. And then finally, how that carries over into almost everything you do. So now I no longer run a gladiator academy on Wall Street. Now I run a nonprofit where we're trying to expose how intergenerational organized crime runs the government and the media. But I take some of the exact same skills that I learned being a problem solver on Wall Street and a problem solver in companies. And by the way, you're not just a problem solver. If you're good, you're not just a problem solver for your customers. You're a problem solver for the company. And you can ask almost anybody, if you want to get anything done in a Fortune 500 company, you go to the sales guys. They know how to do it. They know how to get it done. The real good ones, they've already got all the relationships in place with all the people within the company, et cetera. They're the revenue producers. They have management's attention. That's the way that you get in the door. You want to get into product management, get into there. You want to get into operations, go through the sales guys. You want to get to, whatever industry, the sales guys are the guys that get stuff done within a company. So that's real value. What I do is I try and take that same, problem solving ability, and I try and find people that want to see liberty in our lifetime, that want to have a free society, that want to expose this organized crime. And I make the same value pitch that I would make on Wall Street. I can do that cost effectively. I can take you and I have the same goal. I will help you realize that by taking this capital and deploying it effectively to advance the ball on widely exposing intergenerational organized crimes, control the government, the media, and academia. And I'll do that in a way that is proven to be viral, proven to be successful. I can point to metrics and say, hey, look, this is what we've achieved. And so that's the kind of the pitch that I have. And it's the same problem solving pitch that I would have used to create millions and millions of dollars in value on Wall Street. I'm trying to create the same social value, but I'm using the same skills that I learned in sales and in problem solving on Wall Street to problem solve for this bigger solution. So anyway, I wanted to agree with everything Richard said. I wanted to give everybody some news they could use. And it really is a skill set that I feel blessed to be able to have gotten and kind of excel at. So anyway, that was my 2 cents.
That was fantastic. That was fantastic. All right. So my first question is your middle initial P? Do you have a middle initial for your name? Is it
It's
P?
S.
Oh. Human Productivity Lab. I really thought you based it on your initials, but you're right. It is HSL. All right. So my next one, CEOs. I've worked for CEOs who know how to do sales, and I've worked for CEOs that don't know how to do sales. And the CEOs who don't know how to do sales, they're not in control much. They're not really part of what actually runs the company. But if I'm in your sales organization and I got a big fish client and I can call in my CEO and my CEO does my job better than me, and that's why he's CEO or she's CEO, that's a value add to the sales organization. So your point is you get the sales experience, then you can go basically, it's like it's like one of those, you can go any direction cards in the game. It's like choose your own direction with that skill set. But if you're in the other skill sets, a lot of people are just trying to, I had a lot of technical salespeople that they assist the sale, but they wanted to do the other thing that I did. And I was like, well, I don't really want to trade positions. I don't want to know that stuff. I just want to, I'll tell you how to do this and we can do it together, but I'm not going to be running the demo and typing the code and stuff. I'm more positioning and the value of it to the client. What was this other? Pricing. Salespeople have an amazing influence in pricing. We can raise the price. We can lower the price. We can go back to our bosses and say, we're not going to, we're not charging that client enough. If you see how much value we're providing over there, we're really underbidding that. I can also go and say, hey, look, these people really need a redundant extra license or whatever for whatever reason, and they're good clients and whatever, and I can get them hooked up, right? So we have flexibility based on those human relationships to either extract more from a deal where our value is understated, or to say our value for this company over here is right, but over here at this company, it's not right for these people. And we have to do something to help them out. Right. So there's that flexibility. And then big game hunting, the ability to be a rainmaker, either for fundraising or getting new clients outside of the baseline of what they give you. So a lot of people go to work at a sales organization, you might have some leads. They might have some system where you can get here's some leads, and this is the people you call. A lot of people take that as like the upper bar. I take that as the baseline. That's the minimum. I really don't want to touch too much of that unless I have to. I would rather go and make the relationships where I know strategically this would really help out the company and really help those clients, right? So there's various levels of quality of those interactions. And then that $4,500 hole in the wall. Let me ask this, Howard. If that guy didn't have the sales conversation on two ends with their bosses to convince them to pay $4,500 to drill a hole, and they do that because they have to have engineers and insurance, making sure they're not damaging the structure. It's
Took 3
expensive to do
days.
stuff in New York, right? Yeah, 3 days to do it, right? If they hadn't managed to sell their bosses on that idea, would that other guy be a billionaire right now? Like, there's no billionaire in his future without convincing the boss to drill the hole, which is a sales conversation.
Yep.
Right.
And that is really how you build value and how you build a reputation for being able to provide innovative solutions to complex problems. And the other thing is the only thing that, that we focused on was improving we focused on, it wasn't the only thing, but one of the main things we did is focusing on giving the sales team the in-depth product knowledge to where they could actually provide real value because they understood the technology, they understood where it was going. They could talk on the level of the CTO. They understood what his needs were, how the product delivered him in the marketplace, the positioning technology-wise versus the competition. And to be able to understand all of that for what's essentially rocket science, we had to, we'd take our sales guys and we'd give them these, we called them sales engineering whiteboard sessions where they could go in and ask any question, no matter how dumb it was, and just drill down until they got it, until they really, really understood it. Because the other thing with sales is if you're not providing value, you're out the door. If you're wasting a CTO's time, they're going to be sitting there and they'll probably be polite to you and they'll probably nod their head and they will never take another meeting with you if you do not understand what you're talking about and you cannot provide them value. They ain't got any time for that.
And that is also an important lesson, being able to speak to them on the terms of their needs and what's important. Like, what if you go in there and what is important to you is to sell your software to the people across the table, you've already lost. But if you can go in there and have a conversation and understand what the CFO, the CTO, and the CEO need, what their expectations, what does this thing need to fulfill, you can help to pad that out. Our software doesn't do everything you need, but we can have development do this one piece. We're going to have our CEO establish a relationship with another company. We're going to have an API, and this other piece that this company told you that you think you need, you don't really need it. They were selling you some superfluous stuff. Here's the evidence of that. And now we can actually meet your needs, lower the price, and you're doing business with people that didn't try to trick you, but rather are trying to serve you. It's your choice. We'll be, at the office, call us, and people call. That's low pressure. Right? The people that tried to like sell them some extra stuff they didn't need and not give them full informed consent, they're probably not going to get the deal unless there's already like it's IBM and they just always, no one gets fired for IBM, used to be the saying. Yep. Right? You can compete against them, but the safe decision for the company, just buy IBM, can't go wrong. So there's that dynamic out there too. So salespeople, to Howard's point, amazing amount of value, flexibility, indispensability, future mobility with that skill set. And that was very well articulated and expressed. Thank you, Howard. Sweet. Coffee. And the wind's not that bad. It's died down a little bit. Conspiracy is the story of history. It's the story of plunderers taking care of people who produce. They claim to take care of them through government, which doesn't give you anything. It doesn't take away first. So it's not creating something out of nothing. It's very real what they're doing. They're taking your rights or taking some people's rights and adding more to someone else's rights.
If you haven't heard about our Grand Theft World community membership, here are a few of the things you've been missing. A mobile app where you can access replays of the Grand Theft World podcast and show notes. Access to the Grand Theft World community on Discord, where we crowdsource news and resources, and you can contribute to the show. The opportunity to participate in the Grand Theft World bi-weekly town hall. Exclusive content from Richard Grove, including behind-the-scenes footage and future access to unpublished material. 93 episodes of the Peace Revolution podcast, and the Grand Theft World newsletter delivered straight to your inbox each week. If you want to stay ahead of the great game, visit us at grandtheftworld.com, click or tap the button in the top right-hand corner, and join a vibrant community of researchers blazing a new path to truth. We'll see you there.